And so I'm going to start recording and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. It is Thursday, April 9th, and it is just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. And so this is actually the second of our ongoing seminar series, Parcel Editing in ArcGIS Pro. And that parcel editing part, that's sort of the long goal. Right now, it's just ArcGIS Pro. What do you do with it? How do you get started with it? And actually, next week we're also going to have another seminar on the beginning of the ArcGIS Pro Fabric. So this one is kind of editing in Pro. How do you set it up? And going on from there. All right. So thank you all for coming. We also have with us today Nancy Von Meyer from Fairview Industries, and Nancy and I have been longtime friends, and she and I were talking, and when this whole social distancing component came in, and we talked about how there really was a need for us to go and keep the community together, and sort of at the same time share with one another what we're finding, what we're learning, and to help people become a little bit more understanding. So Nancy, how about if I let you say something here, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, we decided that there's sort of an on-ramp for the ArcGIS Pro, just the editing environment. So Frank was showing me some things. We were reviewing some parcels. I said, Frank, we need to do this on-ramp to help people get to the point where they can begin to explore the tools, because I know when you start out, a lot of it is just exploring the various tools. But the idea of these seminars is just give everyone some ideas on how to get up the on-ramp to get started. And soon enough you'll all be launching ArcGIS Pro yourself and doing your own Google search for help. But Frank did a nice job of getting us started last time in terms of how to get the settings going and looking at some of the tools that might be available, and he'll post the link to that video since that was recorded. And that's real helpful. Just you open ArcGIS Pro and you look at it and you go, okay, so now what? And that's what this is sort of getting us going. So Frank, we appreciate you sharing your expertise, and please ask questions as we go. We're watching the chat window, and between Chris and Frank, we have some real experts at our disposal here.
Thanks. And it's not just going to be please, we're going to be pleading with you. Please,
Yes.
give us some more feedback on what you want to know about Pro. All right. Also, I have up here Pennant Consulting's landing page here on our website, and you see the second element is about our April 2020 schedule, and we actually have 4 seminars set up for this month. On the 9th is in fact the one we're in right now, the ArcGIS Pro, which is sort of the exploration of next generation. When you click on this, it actually opens up this meeting. Wait until we start the meeting, and then you can also click it and save it to your calendar. Next week we have ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric Forum, same time next week. On the 23rd we have an ArcMap Parcel Fabric Forum. Note the different time for next week's meeting. And this actually is a meeting that we've been having since 2013. We've been having this ongoing meeting, and these are all recorded. And next week's, or on the 23rd, we'll be meeting about feature adjustments inside the ArcMap Parcel Fabric. And then finally, on April 30th, we're going to have a seminar on a deep dive, in which we're going to take and explore something really in depth on each of these meetings. And on the 30th, we're going to be exploring the ArcGIS Pro data design tools, some of the new tools that they've built into Pro that are really handy. And there's a whole lot of things in there that if somebody just tells you what it is on the surface, it's like you don't understand everything that you can do with these things. They are amazing. So anyway, go out to our website, and it's on the landing page. It's also on our blog page, so you'll see it there on the blog. All right. So with that, we talked about this last week. We've been a professional services firm, and we have clients across the US. We were formed in 1998. I've actually been beta testers long before then. And I'm a land surveyor in 2 states, taught surveying and mapping, past president of the Florida Association of Cadastral Mappers, and I'm currently a member of the Florida Board of Surveyors and Mappers. So I kind of am a platypus. I'm a surveyor and I'm a GIS professional. And interestingly, I started them both within the same month. I became licensed as a surveyor, and that same month, I started really digging into GIS, and those two have been my passion since the very beginning. So one more thing, I want to introduce you to Chris. Chris is going to moderate today. Chris Conkling, he works for Panda. He's worked for us for almost 3 years now.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Frank. Or Chris, sorry.
I'm not Frank. I'm Chris. I'm a geospatial technician for Panda Consulting, as Frank mentioned. I also happen to be his son. Prior to working for Panda, I was a technician with Apple for 5.5 years, so I have a background in technology. I also have my BA in philosophy, so I also love asking questions, and I'm very good at learning new skills. That's what drew me to Panda Consulting to begin with. It was a company. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with GIS, so entering into Panda Consulting, I was able to learn a lot from both Frank and Brian Kelly as well. So that's been all fun over the last 3 years. But as Frank mentioned, today I'm going to be the moderator. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat and I'll relay them to Frank. Or if you want to unmute yourself and relay that question directly to him, you can do that as well, whatever you're more comfortable with. But yeah, I'm excited to see everybody here.
Yep. And also just, I see a couple posts in the chat already regarding some of those links to those meetings. You can find them either
Correct.
on the landing page at pandaconsulting.com, the first page, or if you go to our blog on pandaconsulting.com, you'll find them there also. And real quickly, Heather, we are going to go over inside of ProFabric how to handle multi-story and all sorts of things. That's actually a topic that gets covered usually in the ProFabric and in the MapFabric sessions. So please feel free to join any one of them. They're all free registration and they're open. And matter of fact, if you join the MapFabric one, we actually have a newsletter that has a copy of every recording since 1920 or since 2013 on all of these different meetings. So real quickly, I just want to go over the GoToMeeting interface so you sort of understand. Most of it's seem to be fine with this. So there is, if you have a webcam on, an active webcam, here's how you actually show which ones are going to be seen and which ones are not going to be seen. It looks like we only have 2 active cams right now. So if you go and click on the little icon for people, it will show you who's here. The next thing over is the chat window. And if you want to put a question up, just go ahead and type it down there. You can either put it to just the organizer or to everybody. We prefer if you have a general question, just send it to everybody and let everybody see. We want to make sure they all understand what questions are. And then finally, if you're having audio or camera problems, go ahead and click on the gear setting and set those up. All right, so our goal for this is to be completely interactive. I have sat through far too many webinars where I'm just sitting there and somebody is going through a scripted demo and they have slides, and this is literally, we're going to have very few slides here at all. And so there's very few slides. This is not a webinar. This is an event where you interact with us. So you have to ask questions, either audio or chat. You have to ask us questions, and Chris will moderate. And we will be sending out email notices. If on the bottom of those email notices, you will see that there is a way for you to go and update your preferences. We set you up in the beginning, and then from there, it's up to you to subscribe or unsubscribe. These email notices contain more information than what we post up on the web, so you might want to go and make sure that you're part of those. And here's the different seminar series. If you only want to go and get email notices for one or the other, you can do it that way. And we're done. We're done. So let's talk about what we did last week. Last week we went over and started introducing the ArcGIS Pro Interface and what it looks like when you start, what you do, how do you go over it. So just sort of to start from the beginning, I'm going to get out of here and just to go over this. So when you first enter ArcGIS Pro, all right, you'll be presented with a sort of a landing page, and this is where you start. And if all of your recent projects are here, they go and they accumulate and they'll be listed there. If you want to pin something here, you can pin it here. If you want to remove it, you can right click on it and say remove, and it'll come out of that list. Over here, this is where you start with a new project. And most times we'll be starting with a new map. So let's go ahead and start with a new map. All right. And you can call it anything you want, you know, Seminar 2. This folder, you want to go and put it someplace where you can keep both a project file, which is what we're creating here, is an ArcGIS Pro project file, and where it's going to install your default GDB, because it will create a new GDB at that location. It will create a default file geodatabase for you to store things in it. All right, now once you create that, it gives you a sort of an open type of folder. It's like now, and this is where Nancy and I were like, well, what do I do next? What do I do next? I don't know what to do next. So the next thing you want to do is you want to make a folder connection. Make sure your folder connection, that you have a connection over to a folder that contains some data. If you're dealing with a file geodatabase, or excuse me, if you're dealing with file-based data, in which case that's what we're doing here. We have a folder here called sample data, and inside of here, these are the 3 sample datas that Nancy gave me. All right. So if this was a geodatabase, I could say add that to my project, and it would then become connected to my project. But because these are shape files, the only thing I can do is I can bring them in to my current map. And again, this is my current map. I could have another map. I could say add them to a new map if I want it. But right now, bring them into my current map. And that's what I've done. Just to show you on a database connection, here is that default geodatabase that's going to have all sorts of information in here that it's going to store as you are working and interfacing with the data in here. We talked about what type of data you can use inside ArcGIS Pro. And you can use a shapefile. You can use a file geodatabase. You can use STE feature classes. All right. You can use web services coming off of an on-premise portal. You can use web services coming off of ArcGIS Online. You can use those also. And when you connect to any of those, you actually can edit them automatically if you have edit rights on them. What it will not access is a personal geodatabase. They are not allowing you to access those and edit those. All right. Okay. So table of contents real quickly. This first area here is the list by drawing order. This is the same as what we had in ArcMap. We have list by data source. We have list by selection. These are what is selectable. This one here is new inside of Pro. This is list by editable. This is the layers that you're going to be editing. All right. And so by default, there is no start editing or stop editing. You automatically are editing when you bring data in there, if you have edit rights on it. So if you do not wish to make these things editable, uncheck them, turn them off. Done, turn them off. All right, I'm going to make these all editable. The next tab here is snapping. What is snappable? So if it is being displayed, and if it is snapping, if it is snappable, you actually can snap to it. And then our final column here is labeling. What are we going to label and how is it? So within ArcMap, we used to have this label manager. Think of this tab here as being label manager integrated into the table of contents. It's already in there. All right. Okay. So the first question that a lot of people have is, so what do I do with this? How do I symbolize this? And there's several ways to get into that symbology. There's the simple way, as there always was in ArcMap. If I click on a single symbol, it will bring up the symbology first with the predefined gallery here that I have, or I can go to my properties and get more intensive ability to go and change the editing, change the symbology of this editing. So by default, again, with the symbol, it just allows me to go and change the symbol, and maybe I don't want any color on it. Maybe I wish it to have, a symbol like this. I can click OK, and that is then symbolized by that. All right. Last week, we talked about some of the more extensive things that you can do with it. Some things that Esri hasn't exposed to a lot of us yet. One of them was that as people that manage parcels, we are always concerned with where are the vertices? Where are the breaks in these lines? And this is especially true with polygons. We're not sure where these things are. Within ArcMap, you always could hold down the V key and it would show you your vertices within about 500 pixels, but that was about it. Within ArcGIS Pro, you actually have the ability to go and symbolize them and maintain them and keep it so that it always shows you every symbol, or every vertex inside your data. So the way to do that, so let's turn this back down again to 1 pixel, is across here in the properties, you have your symbology, you have your layers, and then you have your structure. What we're going to do is we're going to add to the structure of our symbology. So we're going to add another symbol inside of here. Okay. So this first one, this is the fill. This is the outline. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a marker on top of that. Now, all that structure allows you to do is add a marker. It doesn't allow you to go and modify it or anything. It just adds it. Then what you have to do is you have to go back to your layer and then say, okay, now let's set up what this thing is going to be like. So in here, I can click on this new shape marker that I have and tell it that I want to make that marker red. And I probably want to make it like 5 point is good. Now, if I scroll down here, I see also there's an option here for marker placement. I can go to that marker placement and say, do I want to fill this whole polygon with that marker, or do I want that marker to be on the vertices of that polygon? And now when I hit apply here, it goes and applies it. Now will show me every vertice on all of the outline of the polygon. All right. It shows me every vertex that's on there. I can go back and do the same thing. I can go back and do the same thing for each of these. I'm going to go to my Symbology tab, which will get me here. Let's go here. Let's change the structure. Add a marker. Go here and set it up. And say, let's do this as a purple. Probably 7. And we'll scroll down and we say, put that on the vertices. And we'll say, don't put an outline in there. And let's make that there. All right, one more. Let's go here, go to the structure, add a marker, go back here, and let's set this marker to be as choose green. Oh, by the way, let's go back here and let's scroll down and make sure we put it on the vertices. And this we're going to make green the same color just so we can see it. And we're going to turn off the outline, or excuse me, turn off the fill. And there we have Symbology, which goes and basically shows us every vertex inside of our current data set that we're dealing with. All right. So with this, we can actually see all sorts of problems we have with our data, where it's located, where it's on top of one another, where it's not on top of one another. We can see all of that in there. And I think that's just about caught up with where we were last time, right? We show you a couple little tricks in here, but let's start with this and go from here. So the symbology component of it is actually much nicer inside of ArcMap, excuse me, in ArcGIS Pro than it ever was in ArcMap. You could have much more granular control over how those symbolize are specialized, right? However, this is sort of a two-edged sword, because while it allows you to go and do this much faster if you know what you're doing, there's also reasons why it's not quite as nice. So if I go in here and I go to this and I say symbology, right now I did single symbol, right? So I can go and do unique values, all right? And say, okay, well, let's get a unique value for every section number in here. And you'll note, again, I should have only had 36 of them in here. Yeah, 36 values. It was pretty fast to go and do that. All right. What happens when you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of values? Because there is no way to say, oh, wait, don't hold everything, just add one or two of them. No, it adds everything in there. So you want to be careful with, at least with unique values, because it automatically attempts to add them in there for you. All right. Be careful with that. The other thing I want to go and mention to you is that notice I didn't hit apply anywhere. It just did it for me. So what happens if I want to experiment with some symbology? All right. If I want to experiment with some symbology and say, well, let's try this and see what this looks like. It's already applied this. There is no, I can't, oh, no, I don't want to do that, and cancel this and go back. There is not. However, there is a trick to this. If I go up to the undo now lists not just edits, but also the changes that you might have made to the interface itself. So I can actually say, well, let's undo that unique. That's not what I wanted. Actually, let's undo the first one also. So I can go back to where I was before. And notice I can undo all the way back to going and changing and putting the symbols, the markers on top of the vertices and everything. I can do all of that. I can notice it was here. I wish that would get off of there. It says I can make it, when I clicked editable and uneditable in there, it actually recorded those. So it allows you to go and back through all the steps, not just the edits anymore. So it allows you to go back and do all of them. All right, same way with redo, I actually have that capability also. All right, and Nancy says at the top there's also a search in the table of contents here. So you're right, this is a search.
Okay, so put in the number 2 and just hit return. Like I was looking for the section. See how everything disappeared on the drawing order? Now try to get your drawing order back.
Yeah.
So like what happened?
Yeah, so this search is not necessarily a feature search. This, I believe, is in fact a search of the table of contents and the feature classes that you have in there. That is not the old find command at all. That is not the find command. All right.
Okay.
The find command. So don't do that. Don't do that.
How did you get your thing back? You cleared it and it came back.
So what
right?
I did is I went over here and pulled this out. There was something to pull down because I still had something there. I said clear my search. And then I clicked on the exposure triangle here to show it again. All right.
Okay.
So this is actually an exposure triangle that will hide it all if it's showing me the results, or it will go and open it up again and show me everything that's in there. All right.
Okay. That's not the find command.
That is
Search
not.
for the.
That's right.
Okay. Sorry to take you off track.
Hey, that's perfect. It's exactly what I want, because the odds are, if you have the question, other people have a question. All right. Joyce says, instead of undo, can you check it on and off? Joyce, do you have audio? What can you check what on or off? Nope.
Like to have it like to not have it automatically save, I think maybe is what she's getting at, because I had that same issue. You know, you said it automatically saved.
Yeah, these things here.
Yeah.
I don't know. There might be something inside of the options here for that. For general, no, there's the editing. Session versioning, no, I don't know. I don't know whether you actually can go and turn this undo on or off as far as what it's tracking. It's a good question. In the table of contents, turn this search off. I don't think you can. I think you just, it's up there. I don't think you have that option either on there. So let's go back to the find command. The find command is not in ArcGIS Pro anymore. That's it. It's just not there. However, what there is if you look over here under the map tab, in the inquiry, there is in fact a locate command. Now that locate brings up the locate pane. Remember we talked about last time that these are actually panes, and that's P-A-N-E, not P-A-I-N. These are panes in which you're interacting with on ArcGIS Pro. All right. And so inside of here, if we're under the locate, we pull this down, we can see here's the actual search parameters that they have in place here. By default, it doesn't necessarily mean it can search your layers. It only means it can search, you can search for an XY, or you can do the GIS world geocoding. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tell it to install and allow me to start searching for one of my layers. Nancy, I think this sample one is probably the most complete one. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Okay. So when I do that, it then gives me a list and allows me to set options as far as when I want to go and search that thing. How do I want to search it? For example, do I want it to be exact search, or do I want it to be just sort of a fuzzy search? Let me search for anything that contains that string that I'm searching out in. All right. What else can I search here, Nancy? What else you think might be in here? Let's just include that. All right. So now when I go here and search for something, give me a PLS ID in here, Nance.
Wait a second. I was going to seeing if you could search for the section 2. That's what I was looking for. That's when I got myself all into.
So it's at 02?
should be.
Okay. So here's all the 02s. So by the way, this is the geocoder. I want to turn that off. Here is everything with 2 in it for all of this. Now that is in fact the 2nd division, yeah, on here. So maybe I need to go in and refine this a little bit more and go down here and go here and set this up. Yeah, where is it here?
I'm trying to kind of click along with you here. I lost myself already.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was doing this a little bit fast. So let me go in here and provider settings. Here it is here. Nope, that's the add one. How do I go and modify it? That's interesting. Let me take it out and add this one again. So put contains here the 2nd division number maybe here.
Yep, there you go. There you go.
Okay, so go back here. Let's clear this out and 02. There's all of the 02s in here. And I can zoom to this one. I can add that to my current selection. So it's just like the old find command is, but did you see how fast that was? All right.
Yeah,
Did
it
you
was
see?
pretty good.
It was pretty good, pretty fast.
Frank, we have a
So
couple questions in the chat here.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mark wants to know, can you do a layer search to find any layer without needing to set up the provider? And then Robert wants to know, will the search tool honor the definition query?
First question, Mark. I do not believe it will do a search through these layers unless they are specifically integrated into the locate settings. All right, they have to be added there before it will actually go and do it. So it's not a global search. You actually have to set it up a little bit beforehand on there.
Hey, Frank.
Yes, sir.
This is Mark. I was telling you that I just tried it and you can do a search without having to set that up under locate.
Ooh.
So for example, if you do a layer search and type in a parcel number without having that set up under locate, it'll still find it.
Interesting.
Oh, really?
Because I'm just trying it. And I can say I don't need an exact, I can do an enhanced. Ooh, thank you, Mark. I didn't even know that. So this is showing me this one inside of here that I can zoom to. It's showing me all those. Thank you. So here's the other element inside the layer search that you want to be aware of. Because you can either search all layers, you can search just in your current extent, just where it's searchable, search visible in the current extent. All right. And then here's the other part that seems to catch a lot of people. By default, it comes up to match the exact value that you're searching in there. That's usually not what we wind up doing. So you can, in fact, match any part or just do an enhanced search where it just looks for anything inside any of the feature class, any of the attribute fields inside of those. All right. Thank you, Mark. That was great. On to Robert. He asks whether or not you can, will the search tool honor the definition query? Great question. Great question. So if I go over here and I set a definition query against this layer, all right, and I set the definition query where, let's say, contains the text 02, all right. So let's just go out here and zoom to this and see. It seemed to have everything on here. So Let me edit this. What else could I put on here? Oh, because they all have 2 on here.
Yeah.
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 Maybe I need to do something else.
Let me give you
Something that's going to limit these as far as a township or something.
Yeah, can you write a definition query where the second division text is SESE?
SESE? Yep.
Yeah, the second. Okay.
So by the way, I really like this new query builder on here. It's much easier to work with. And it has literally almost everything. I've not found anything I can't do with it right now. It allows you to go and build this. Okay, so it contains the text. If I wanted another clause, I don't see any of them in there. Is it?
Oh, case sensitive? Is it case sensitive?
It might be case sensitive. Nope. Second division text.
No, second division number. Second division number. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
second
what
division.
it is. Okay. Second division number contains the text, so that would be a number.
Yeah, but it's also got letters. You know, me and my numbers and letters.
Oh,
there you go.
there it is. Okay. Contains SESE, right? There you go. So now.
That's the pattern.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
so now, what is a unique value in here that we can look for? Let's go and say, let's do an identify on this string here. WO maybe?
They're all going to have that because that's
Okay.
they all have WO.
What about
but the section
1096?
Okay.
In the chat, Mark says yes, it does honor the definition query. Just to answer the question.
Thank you, Mark, for without having me to go through all this. Thank you. That is. Thank you, Mark. So there you go.
But if you only wanted to see taxable parcels and you had a field in your database for taxable lands or non-taxable lands, that's a nice way to limit what you're looking at, right?
Yes.
So the definition query.
The definition query definitely is the best way to do it. And like I said, I like the way ArcGIS Pro has increased or made easier the ability to go and set and establish definition queries on here. All right, it's a much easier way to go and implement those. You don't have that double click, single click on the operand, double click on the value. You don't have any of that. Or show me everything. It's now, boom, it's there. Matter of fact, when you go in here to set your definition query, it automatically here gives you all your values in here. I mean, so it's so much nicer than it used to be. And you see how fast it actually is. Now, I can tell you there's a reason why it's so fast. And it's so fast because before it does anything, it pre-reads this. So one of the complaints that people often have about ArcGIS Pro is that it seems to take time to do a lot of these things. It's like, why am I waiting for this to do something? Well, the reality is it's reading, pre-reading some of those variables that you might have in there. It's pre-reading those, and that's one reason why it's doing it. And that's especially obvious. For example, let's go in here and I'm going to open up my attribute table. I right-clicked and said open up the attribute table on here. All right, and so here's my attribute table for this data set. I want to do a select by attributes from here, just sort of to find something. Again, rather than using the locate, I'll go and I'll use the traditional select by attributes. And within ArcMap, that was located right here in the attribute table. Not so. Many of us are trying to get it back in there, but right now at 2.5, it's not in there. Instead, it is in the map tab, select by attributes, and it pulls up its own pane. Again, last week we talked about this, that in fact, what's happening is it's actually everything inside of ArcGIS Pro is now basically a Python script. So it actually pulls up the geoprocessing tool to go and find, pulls up the geoprocessing tool, starts that, and then it gives you all the parameters so that virtually almost every command that you're interacting with is that same sort of process to go through. And it has to read things all the way through. So here it is. I want to do a select by attribute on this. By the way, here you see select by attribute is not there anymore. So let me build this where second division number, and you see it's all pre-read already. So now I can go in here and run this, and it will run it, and there they are. But notice again, it took a while for it to go and open up, and it's because it is pre-reading everything before it actually opens up for you. Pre-reading, starting the geoprocessing tool processor, starting that script, and pre-reading what you had selected when you initiated that call. All right. So we went over locate, right? I actually like this, but you do have to set some of it up beforehand for you. And it is obviously, as the last time, I'm still discovering things about it because it's not as comprehensively documented yet as far as what's in there and what they're putting in all the time. But it's actually very nice on here. Let me go and because I actually did something here that many of you may not have recognized. I'm going to close out this attribute table, by the way. I went over here, and here's find. This is the locate button. I went over here to explore. Now again, explore is kind of interesting because explore is both navigation and it's the old identify tool. All right. So with the navigation tool, again, I can use it allowed me to go in and look at pop-ups. So if I go and click on something here, all right, it will go and do an identify on here basically. And it allows me to identify on here. Now, what we have to be careful of is this really is not the old identify tool. This is a new one for HTML pop-ups, okay? And in order to go and configure that pop-up, you right-click on the layer and go to configure the pop-ups, and it brings this up. And this is much like anybody who's worked inside of the new web maps and ArcGIS Online. It's the same thing. You configure this pop-up and you can go and edit the fields and tell it, what do you want to see? What do you not want to see? All right. What the labels are on some of these and such. And once I'm done here, now when I do a pop-up, in this case, this one is no longer showing me all the other things. This pop-up, though, can be configured with HTML, can be configured with charts, with images, with all sorts of things. So it is not just the standard identify anymore. It is this combination of the old HTML pop-up and the identify tool. Okay. The good thing is, because this is Pro and this is set up for publishing things to the web, whatever configuration you do here, if you go and share this project out, if you share this map out as a web map, that configuration follows it as much as possible, depending upon what platform you're publishing it to. If you do it to premises, it's there. If you do it to hosted services, some of, ArcGIS Online, some of those come through, some of them don't. But they did recently make some changes in here where you can do 2-line labels inside of ArcGIS Online. So they've made changes. Here, also, the same way we used to have on identify, you just want to identify the topmost, everything that's visible, everything selectable, what is selected in the contents, or do I want to have no pop-ups? I tend to be an edit guy, a data guy, so I rarely go and look at that. So I usually have it as no pop-ups because I'm still I click on here a lot on the drawing area, and I struggle with that. I had an interesting question come up here recently, in which I was introducing somebody to ArcGIS Pro, and she made an observation that I hadn't thought about. There are no scroll bars on our drawing anymore. All right, there's no scroll bars here or here. Why not? And I guess Esri's developers looked at this and said that these seem to be redundant because the way you navigate, again, using this Explorer, you navigate by doing things such as if you want to go and zoom in, you can hold down the Shift key and draw a box, and that is a zoom in. Let's go over here to this again. If you do a control, you can view the pop-up set within that rectangle. If you do it and it points to north, B, you look around, C, explore. You can use the zooming and zoom continuous on here. If I go and right click, I can, with my right button holding down, I can do that. If I hold down my depending upon certain commands, in this case, if I'm just a normal Explorer, if I hold down my left button, I can move it around. It basically is a pan. The keyboard shortcuts still work at the lower left corner of your keyboard where the Z is the zoom, and you can see it changing my cursor as I'm hitting it. The X is the zoom out, and the C is the pan. So you can still use those three on here to navigate around, but our scroll bars are gone. Those are artifacts on here from what we used to use. All right. So a couple other things that are still sitting here that we haven't even talked about. We used to have a scale bar up here. That scale bar is now down here. Still works the same way it did. All right, you can type this in, scroll around on here. Next to it is the snapping control, where you can set what you're snapping to. And this works exactly the same as it did inside of ArcMap, except it's available as this new interface on here. Here's your snapping to the nearest point, to the nearest endpoint, to the vertex, on the edge or the line, intersection. This is the midpoint. This is tangent to a curve. Here's where you actually can set your snapping tolerance in here by going and snapping that. This is one area where I still disagree with this. If you note, my snapping does not have any color on it. It is right now off. And you see when I move my cursor over it, it comes on, it says snapping's off. If I click on it, it now has a color, and it literally means that it's toggled down and snapping is now on. All right, snapping is on. That's the only indication whether you're snapping or not snapping. As we move over beyond that, here's dynamic constraints. Dynamic constraints are an interesting element here in that they now have the ability to go and give you for example, what direction and distance your rubber banding is. so that I can actually say, I want to go and know what here, and I want to know what the absolute bearing is on this, and I want to put them on. All right, so my constraints are now on. Let me go in here, and I'm going to go to create a polygon. And first click will start this, and as you'll note, it then tells me the rubber banding that I have, how far I've gone, and what the actual bearing is on that. And this seems kind of cool until you've used it for a while. Then quickly you realize, oh my gosh, I'm cluttering up my drawing, and I may not need that. I may not even want that to occur on here. All right. It's interesting watching people use this first when they start, and then as they go through, almost exclusively when they start, they put it on. They think, oh, this is really cool. And then after they use it for a while, they realize, no, this isn't cool. I could just as easily go here and then say, well, I could do all of my normal constraints, bearing and distance if I wanted to go and apply it that way. I really don't need to know exactly what my rubber band is. I can find one use for having constraint here. And let me go in here. If I turn my constraints on, it's a real simple measure tool. All right, I can see, well, how far is it to there? And how far is it to there? And what's the bearing from that point that I last clicked on my cursor to there? Kind of neat, but those of you that know me know one of my favorite expressions is it juice worth the squeeze? This juice isn't worth it. It's kind of cool, but I don't want to clutter up my area that I'm drawing in just for that. Okay.
So kind of like ArcMap, Frank. There's 13 ways to do any one thing. So we were able to set snapping in the table of contents. We're able to set snapping on the toolbar down below. You're able to. Seems like you're able to set things in a variety of places depending on where you are. Correct?
Be careful with that. That's a good point, Nancy. But be careful with that because you really don't set the granular elements of what you're going to snap to. You only snap which layers do you wish to be able to snap to. On the snapping here, it's like, okay, so what can I snap to? What layers can I snap to? Because by default, if you can see it, you could snap to it. You could trace it. You could do anything if you can see it. But this allows you to say, no, even if I can see it, I don't want to snap to it. Okay. But
Okay.
down here is the more granular. Which elements inside those features do you actually want to be able to snap to? That sort of thing. Okay.
So is that true? That also true for the corrections as well? Because there's also a corrections thing at the bottom, 2 icons over there. It has the ground to grid correction, but that was also settable in our original setup settings too, correct?
Yeah. That's also the same sort of thing. And this is in ArcMap, we also had the ability to go and set a ground to grid correction. We always had that capability. I think it was either on the COGO or on the advanced editing toolbar there. You could set that, but you want to be careful because it's the same sort of thing. It will tell you whether or not you have one set. And again, the only indication you have is that blue there, and you'll see this, that you can actually hide that as far as whether or not it's in there. So what does this thing do? Okay. What does this thing do? Let's go and see if we can turn this thing off here. Okay. So what does ground to grid do? And by the way, ground to grid is also located over here on the edit tab. Ground to grid allows you to go and establish what can be simplified thought of as a bearing rotation on here. But it's not just a bearing, it's a bearing rotation and a scaling factor. And this mostly has to do with when you're dealing with projected coordinates. When you have ground distances that you wish to project up to the grid, you can go and establish, using your projection and using the difference in elevation between your ground and where the grid is, it will go and automatically apply it. So you can go and input what the difference is in your bearing rotation. All right. And you can do that a couple different ways. And just sort of, maybe I can do a drawing here. All right, a real primitive drawing here, and just talk about the differences in ground to grid as it relates to directions. Why we're doing this. So again, this is real simplified. This is the Earth. Here's the equator. This up here, where is that? What is that thing up there?
North.
No, that's Santa's worship.
North Pole.
Okay, no. True north, all right? True north on here. So if we go and move over here on here, within a Cartesian grid, most projections, true north is parallel to the central meridian inside of here, right? So that this is here, whereas true north here actually goes here. I'm sorry, I said true north, that's grid north. Whereas this is true north as it relates here. So there's always this little angle. This is commonly referred to in most of the surveying text as being a lambda angle. This is the angle or the difference between grid north and true north within here. And this changes constantly as we move across the Earth. Depends upon the projection that we're using, whether or not it has one single central meridian or has multiple central meridians. And it's a difference between the grid north and the true north in here. This is what this is. And I apologize, it's really simplified. But this is a way that you can do this. You can also use this. So this tool allows you to go in and input that distance for your project, for your survey. It allows you to go and input that if you're lucky enough to have a surveyor go and provide that to you. But this can also be used if you've got for parcel mapping, if you have a survey or legal description that gives you an assumed bearing, where it says, assuming the bearing of this right-of-way line is X. Well, you can then go and figure out what the difference is between what that right-of-way line is mapped at and what it actually is in the legal description, and you can input that offset, and it will go and carry that offset on through all the calculations that you do while this ground to grid correction is turned on. All right. And that's the same thing with, let me go in and let's see if I can go in. Oh no. How do I turn this thing off? Oh my gosh. How do I get back to the pointer here? There we go. There we go. Wow. That was freaky. All right.
That was well done.
Yeah. All right. So that also, now that I know how to do this, that also deals with, when you go and take the curvature of the Earth and you have your grid here and you're taking a ground distance and projecting it up to, sorry, I'm going back and forth. Projecting up to the grid. All right. So here, so there is a difference between this distance and this distance because of that projection. And this is also called the scale factor. So you have the difference in direction and you have the scale factor, which when you're going and taking something which has ground information, whether it be a true bearing or whether it have the separate bearing base and ground distances, all right, and going and moving it up and up to the grid. So let me go and I know we have some surveys.
Frank, just so you're aware,
yes, sir.
when you're done with this, Joyce wants to know if you can snap by priority in regards to snapping.
Snap by priority. This is a great question. Let me turn that off. Snapping settings. I don't know if you have snap priority where you tell it to snap to one layer over the other. I don't believe you do. I don't believe you have that capability in here.
So when you set the snapping there on the table of contents, wasn't there more you could do there though? Like you could determine whether a layer was snappable or not, but then could you set some constraints for the snapping in there?
No, you can set it so that you can make that the only snappable layer, but I don't think you can set the priority and say, I want, even though these two layers are snappable, I want this one to be snapped before the other one. So let's go and look in here one more time. Let's go here. I don't think
Mark says you might be able to determine priority if you drag them up and down, each feature up and down. Are you able to do that?
Look at this. Mark, I should have you teach me some of these tricks, all right? Thank you.
So the snapping priority is the order listed?
That's what I think so. So again, with this, and I'm making an assumption here, okay? With this, and let's start with this. When ArcMap or when ArcGIS Pro draws, they draw from the bottom up, but things like snapping, it snaps from the top down. All right, it snaps down through these. So this would be the top priority, this would be the second priority, and so on. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Wow, that's sneaky.
Yep. Well, I got to tell you, so much of the settings in here are not obvious. They're hidden, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for all that. All right. So Joyce, thanks for the question. Mark, thank you also.
I got
one more.
I got one more complication. If you had a definition query against that layer, so show me all of the surveys since 1970, would the snapping also only go snap to the surveys that were since 1970?
So the definition queries basically set which features inside of a layer are actually displayed or workable. So basically, it's a way to go and exclude features that don't match that definition query, so that you would only be able to snap to the features that match that definition query. All right.
So that's pretty slick. That's pretty slick. So you could build some pretty specific criteria then. You could say, I only want to snap to parcels that were constructed after 2015 as a definition query.
But remember, the definition query says this is the only thing I'm going to interact with are those that match that. So you don't get to see the others. All right.
Right.
You don't get to see the others. Sorry. So it's excluding them from both visibility and from selectability on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we were back here. So inside the ground to grid, there's a couple things you can do. If in fact you know what the scale factor is and what the direction offset, you can input them. You can also have it, for example, with the the scale factor, you can have it compute the difference if you have an elevation model inside of your project. All right. Now, Esri, I understand, does have an elevation model that's available from ArcGIS Online that you can utilize. I don't know how accurate this is, but you could, in fact, go and utilize that. And if you have this option then selected, as you go and input, it will actually calculate what the ground distance is and compare it to what's projected up on your grid. So we'll do automatic ground to grid for the scale factor on this. It's actually pretty slick. It's about time they did this. I wish they would also do it with the direction offset, because when we're dealing with the lambda angle, that actually can be computed, because if you know what your projection is, you know how far away from your projection you are, so you can calculate what the lambda angle is by how far away you are. The dirty little secret is that the further away you get, the bigger that is, so that a line, yeah, now I'm getting really, as a surveyor, the line actually has two different offsets. It has the offset at one end of the line if it's horizontal, one end of the line, and offset on a different one out at 9 decimal places or something, but it's out there a ways. So just know that the direction offset, the bearing offset, is usually given as a project or a task, because the differences are so minimal, you can't even see that. And the scale factor depends upon where you're at as far as how much change in elevation you have, as far as whether that impacts you. I can tell you one more dirty little secret. Surveyors don't like to say this, but on most of the information that you get from surveyors, they will give you grid bearings, but they will give you ground distances. All right, because ground distances is what's legally required to appear on a legal description. It's required to give the ground distance so that the general public can go out there and replicate what you did and find it. So usually it is grid bearing, especially if you're working within a subdivision, grid bearing, but it's ground distance on there. In Florida, we're a big sandbar. We don't care about this. I mean, the highest point in Palm Beach County is 33 feet above elevation, above sea level. That's it. There is no such thing as a mountain in Florida. There's some hills. I think the highest point in Florida overall is something like there's the central ridge that runs through the middle of Florida, and I think it goes up to 150 feet above sea level. That's it. But I know you get in some other mountainous areas, there's huge differences between where the actual grid is and where the actual ground distances are on there. So that, again, plays it. One more thing here, you can enter the ground and grid by drawing a line and saying, okay, here's what this line is, here's what the grid says it is, compute the distances, that's what this is, and here's the other one, you can draw both of them on there and go from there. Ground to grid, really good, especially if you're doing really precise work. Know what it is. It also depends upon where you're at as far as how much that really comes into play. As surveyors, we love it, but for most parcel mapping, it really isn't as critical. Most of the precision levels of parcel mapping, especially parcel mapping for property assessors, it's nowhere near that close where you have to go in and be careful with it. But for surveyors, yeah, BLM, you guys ought to be looking at this too. So, because you're dealing with really long lines in here. So, all right, ground to grid. Thank you, Nancy. That's a really good, a good point to bring up. It is in there. All right, that's what this is here. The correction. There's also a grid that you can turn on. Grid is interesting when you're doing a lot of editing in my work, but for most parcel mapping, it really doesn't come into play. It's interesting when you start looking at doing 3D, but other than that, it's again, we tend to keep it off all the time. Okay, is there any questions or anything that I can do before I start moving into another area? We taking care of most of them?
Nothing in the chat right now. Yeah.
Okay. What can we talk about now? We talked about, go ahead, Nancy.
I was wondering if I know that it's, I don't know if we'd be able to get very deep into it, but where are the COGO tools and just the straight parcel mapping in Arc, not Fabric, but just straight out, enter some bearings and distances and make a polygon in Arc Pro?
Okay. All right. So interestingly, inside of ArcMap, these were all contained on separate toolbars inside of here. However,
Right.
with ArcGIS Pro, COGO is built in everywhere. All right. It's built in everywhere. There is no separate COGO toolbar. It is there. And
Nice.
yeah, so I'm on the editing tab right now. Remember, here's the gallery. All right. And remember, we said that if you want to see all the tools, you can also click on all tools and it will show you the modify features, which lists all the tools that you use for editing. And underneath COGO, there is a traverse tool. All right. Now, here is the downside. The traverse tool only works with lines. All right, only works with lines on here. What I'm going to do is I'm real quickly going to go in here, and inside of here, I'm going to create a new shapefile. All right, this new shapefile, I will just call this lines, not lines. I will call this lines. This is a polyline in here. I don't care about the feature class. I don't care about that. Let's try to at least match the same projection of our shape files. All right. There it is here. And that's really all I'm going to do right now. Just going to create a line feature class. It is not going to have COGO geometry yet. All right. I guess I need to go and, is it in here? It is in here. Okay. So if I look at the attributes, there's nothing in here at all. So because I want to demonstrate the traverse on here, I'm going to add the COGO fields in here. So this is again a toolbar. This is a geoprocessing tool. And if I type in COGO, it allows me to search through all the tools and say which feature class do I want to add COGO lines to. And I'm going to tell it, go ahead and add that. Again, let's remove this. And let's go and find it here. Interestingly, by the way, you see this? This is the folder that has all of the shape files, but it's only showing me the line feature classes on here. So they're becoming smarter in, I should probably do this. Lines being edited, it's not being edited. Oh, really? Gotta love the locks. Oh, I think I may have worked myself into an issue here. Let's real quickly get out and then go in again. Let it release that lock on those shape files.
Wait, create a lock recall?
As far as the geoprocessing element on there. So COGO, enable COGO on here. All right, let's go and find sample data here. Here's my lock. There it is. So now let's look at this thing. So the COGO fields inside of Pro: direction, distance, radius, arc length, radius 2. For those of you that are COGO people, first question is, what's missing here? It's like Jeopardy. I'll wait.
Delta.
The delta.
Curve.
There is no delta on the COGO fields inside of Pro. All right. There is no delta being stored. It is in fact calculated. And the reason for this is that a curve inside of ArcMap and inside of ArcGIS Pro is actually nothing more than a bent line. Whereas in the ArcMap parcel fabric, it was a true curve that had 6 different parameters on it, had a beginning point, a termination point, a radius point. It had the arc length, and it had 2 radial lines. Not so anymore. Inside of Pro, it is a bent line, so that they will store the chord direction. All right, that's what this is. That stores the chord direction. This distance field, that actually on a curve becomes a chord distance. The radius is actually storing the radius in there, and it's storing the length. Everything else get calculated off. This is for storage inside of a spiral, by the way, which they now can support. So that's the first thing I want to talk about with COGO. Aren't you glad you asked about COGO, Nancy? And then secondly, I want to talk about this, okay? So Joyce said, what about the chord in a curve inside of ArcGIS Pro COGO? The chord distance is stored in the distance field. It is the straight line between both ends of that line, okay? That's the chord distance. So it's called distance, but it's actually the chord distance on here. So here, then, let's look at the direction field. What is that? It's a number. It's not a string value anymore. And the distance field is a number. It's not the string value anymore. These are all number fields. They are not any long. This is not, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is different, right? The COGO inside of Pro sort of carryovers what was initiated in the ArcMap parcel fabric. It stores these as numbers because it's starting to do calculations. Oh, remember we just had the ground to grid correction, so it could calculate the difference between what was input and what it should actually be storing. It's doing a direction calculation, storing the differences between these 2 angles and taking to whatever you put in, and it's applying that to it, and it's storing that other value on there. Same way with the distance. All right.
Joyce says even for a non-tangent curve.
Any curve. The direction field on a non-tangent curve stores the chord bearing. So it doesn't retain the information as far as whether or not it's tangent or non-tangent. It just considers it a curve. While you are constructing it, that's when you actually tell it how to go and build it. Okay, left and right, that is a, we'll illustrate that, okay? So I loaded this just to check it is in fact editable. So let's go ahead and open up editing. Matter of fact, let's go to the modify down to our traverse, and let's actually start a traverse. All right. So over here is the traverse pane. This is line. This is what layer you're working against. And if you're dealing with multiple line layers, they would all be listed there. All right. But that's how you do that. You start, you actually can either click on here or you can actually assign it a XY coordinate to start at, or you can snap to an existing point. In this case, I'm just going to do this because I'm just illustrating these. And then, okay, here it is. What are we going to do? We're going to input a bearing. Now we can type in north 45 degrees east, all right, and hit return. And then notice it went and stored it, and we can now type out the distance, 500 feet. All right. Okay, so there it is, 500 feet on here. And let's go through here. Let's make sure. There we go. Okay. I waited for it to move that up. So at the same time, there's now multiple ways to inputting things. Now, if you notice on my direction, I have the ability to have a north azimuth, a south azimuth, polar bearings or polar direction, or quadrant bearing. I almost always do quadrant bearing, but if you think about it, you might have a DOT right-of-way map that has north azimuth on it, whereas the rest of your data might be in quadrant bearings. This gives you the ability to interact with those and modify those. So let's go and put our next course in here. And I'm going to type in, this time it's going to be 45, but I'm not going to use the letters to notate it. I'm going to use the 45-2, meaning quadrant number 2. The northeast is quadrant 1, southeast is quadrant 2, southwest is quadrant 3, and northwest is quadrant 4. This is similar to what was in the parcel fabric and I think some of the earlier traverses. So I can type that in. All right. And then I can here have the option, what is the distance I want it to go? Same thing here. I have the ability to put in miles or feet, US feet, yards, kilometers. There's a whole series of different overwrites I can put in here. But by default, it copies the value from above and it puts it there. So I can hit return and it's there. I could also type in a deflection angle. So in this case, I want to go 90 degrees to that previous one. And this time, instead of being 500 feet, I want it to go 450 feet. All right. So that was now southeast 45 degrees for 450 feet. Now what I want to do is I want to put a curve in here so we can talk about curves and how they are input and how they are stored. This first information I'm going to put in here is going to be something that sets the direction. And it turns out that there's multiple ways to do that. Let me see if I could draw again here. So with a curve, all right, you have a curve that's tangent, and I know that's not drawn very well. You have the ability to have a chord bearing. So this is the tangent bearing. You have the chord bearing, and then 90 degrees here for the radius point here. This is then the radial bearing. All right, so I have 3 different options as far as what I want to do, as far as how I want to input this curve. But I have to tell it how is that curve oriented inside of here. Now, by the way, up here with this tangent bearing, there's also another thing that we can do. There is an asterisk symbol, and that's a shortcut to tangent. So I can tell it that this is in fact a tangent curve, which is what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and erase that. I'm back here, and I'm going to tell it that using the asterisk, I can say this is a tangent curve, and I have in this case, I don't want to put the distance in, so I'm going to type 0 in, and then I'm going to tell it what the radius length is. And in this case, I'm going to type a 50-foot radius, all right? But that 50-foot radius, it's here that I tell it whether it's to the left or the right. It's no longer a separate field, but it's whether it's a positive value or a negative value. Positive value means that it is a curve to the right. Negative value means it's a curve to the left. So I'm going to type that in. Now I have to put in one more parameter, and my choices are I can put in the arc length, I can put in the chord length, or I can put in the delta angle, the central angle on here. So I'm going to tell it I want 90 degrees here on here. All right. So I can input it 90 degrees. There it is. It is, notice what happened here is it took that and it's giving me the distance, the chord out. Why is it giving me that should be 90 degrees here for the chord bearing here. It's interesting. So we go, there's the tangent out. Here is 450 back. 450 brings me back to here. It tells me, here's my misclosure information because it closed within my limit. All right. My closure information, I can set under the options here, how close I want my tolerance to be for closure to it automatically close up and do that. In this case, I set it to 1. Now, here's an interesting thing that's different from ArcMap. While I am inputting these values in, it is automatically creating those lines. Every time I hit return, it did a line to the next one, it created a new line for me. So there is no apply or create or anything like that. There is just type this in, type this in, type this in, type this in. Some of the other things I can do, I can change where the start location is of this. All right, I can change this to be, set my start location. Oh, I guess because I closed it, I'm done there. I could have modified it. And again, it closed out, so it finished. Or I could say, let's do a new one. And it will allow me to go and do a new one here. And again, go on and do that. Here is another thing that's in here. If I start just going and in here, and then some weird things happen here. Okay. If I just go and digitize a line in, notice there are brackets around this. So it is going to store on these lines that in fact, this was not input, but this was digitized for this value. So if I just go and digitize a series of lines in here, it is going to calculate, or it's at least going to store it, but it's going to store that these are digitized lines. These are not real values that are input off of a on here. So a couple things here. If we go to the attributes, all right. Oh, you know what I did? I forgot to set. See, last session, I went and I set all my units on here. And on this session, I started from scratch and I never set my units. So none of this got stored. Sorry about that. So a little embarrassing for me, but this brings up that other point where you have to store these and you have to set these things. What am I talking about? Talk about it. Under the options, the units, I've got to set what type of I'm setting foot, my angular units. These are set to degrees, minutes, and seconds. My area units, I have to go and set these. My direction units, going to be quadrant bearings and such. All right. So until I set those, none of those things are actually stored out there and recorded. Tori actually went and noticed. She said, "There's no misclosure bearing shown. Hard to find which is the wrong line if you have a misclosure." You're right. You're right, Tori. It is not. They believe right now that that's not necessary. As surveyors, as parcel mappers, we need to tell them to put this back in. It is an important element on here, something we need to have available to us again. We need to have that available. There is misclosure distance, misclosure ratio. The ratio is the difference, the distance in misclosure divided by the overall length of the traverse, and then the calculated area. But they don't give you anything else on here. There is also no adjustments on here yet. Yeah, and like Tori, she mentioned she'd rather have the bearing because the bearing then helps us to figure out what line it might be on. We'll look for a shortage or an overage in those lines. All right, so Nancy, did I answer your question? I don't even know.
Nancy had to step away for a moment.
Okay. So let's go in here and select this and select this and this. So while we're at this, well, actually, Raj, we're at 4:30 already. Let's cover one more thing here. Selections. For those of you that were not here last time we did it, selections. In ArcMap, you would select something, you would add Shift, hold down your Shift key to add to that selection or to delete from the selection. If it was already selected, I'm holding my Shift key now. If I had it already selected, it would unselect it from this. Not so anymore. With ArcMap, once you have something in your selection set, to remove it from that selection, you hold down your Control key to remove it from that. All right. Okay. We are actually at 4:30. We've run over what our normal time is. So are there any other pressing questions for now? Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to hold off for, because it's going to be next month now before we meet again on ArcGIS Pro? Now's the time.
I have a question.
Yes.
I joined late. Are these recorded at all?
They are in fact being recorded, yes. And if you subscribe to the mailing list, if you've signed up, and let me go and mute you, sorry about that. If you subscribe to the newsletter, and let's go back here to this. Here at the bottom of it, if you subscribe here to this, and there's also, this is what the subscription looks like. We will include on the subscription a link to the recordings. All right, so you get a recording for, actually what you do is you get a link to the folder that contains all the recordings on here. All right.
Mark says, keep going, we're learning. And Joyce asks, once you set your settings, do your settings stay?
Yes, your settings actually stay for this project. All right, so it is a project by project setting more than anything else. And you know, we at Panda, we work all across the country, so we have all sorts of different settings in here as we're going through. So yeah, it is a project setting more than anything else on this. All right. All right. So
I hate to step back. Again, this is me about the subscription. I'm on my phone, so I couldn't see what the link was. So if you,
I'm sorry. So here's, let me go and tell you the easy way to do it. If you
Okay,
go to
thanks.
pandaconsulting.com, all right, and our landing page, the front page, there, the second section talks to you about, it actually gives you links to the seminars, all right, with our April 2020 schedule for them. And then at the bottom here is a sign up for the seminar series, and it brings you to the subscription page. All right, and you have to put in your email, first, last name, and the organization in which you work for, and then which of the newsletters you want to subscribe to. And you can do one of them or all of them. You know, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want on there. And then what format you want it in, whether you want it plain text or whether you want it HTML, and subscribe. All right, and that will get you on there, and that from that you will get a link to the recordings. We internally are trying to figure out whether we make the recordings available to just everybody, or whether we make that sort of an added value that at least you get on the subscription list, so that we know who's here. I don't even know who's here today. So, all right, hopefully that helps on there.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Sorry I had to mute you again. We were getting feedback in there. All right.
Joyce wants to know, is each deed or plat considered a new project?
No. Sorry, the nomenclature. So this thing right here that I created, this seminar number 2, what used to be a map inside of ArcMap is the project. The project is a collection of data that you're working on, maps, toolbars, all sorts of things that you can have in here. And that's another interesting thing. I could actually go and I'm back here on this. I could actually go in here and make a connection to another folder. Why don't we do that? I'll make a connection to another folder in here. Just hopefully nobody's going to be concerned with this. Back here. Okay. And from that, I can actually go in here. Sorry. And I made the connection to the wrong place. Sorry. In here, I could then go and tell it to go and add this to the project, go over to my databases, and I could say, here's a parcel fabric in here, add this to a new map. So I can have multiple maps in the same project. All right. I can have multiple maps in that same project. And so the project itself is now a combination of multiple things. It's sort of ArcMap on steroids. You can have more than one map. You can have more than one layout. ArcGIS Pro allows you to go and edit a whole bunch of different things. I can give you another demonstration on here, in that maybe I go and open up another here. By the way, you can open up ArcGIS Pro more than once on your computer. All right. So I can go in here and I can see in here that this project has multiple maps in it. It has a map that we do all the parcel editing in. It has another map that we do ETL in. It has another map that has soils in it, another map that has publication layers in it, and another one that has subdivision information in it. So a project can contain multiple maps in here. It can contain multiple maps. It can contain multiple layouts if you're going to do multiple printing on here. So the project isn't necessarily the data set. It's more of a collection of everything you're working on within one single I hate to say the term again, another project, right? It's okay. What is everything you're working on here and everything you're dealing with on here? All right.
So we have a couple questions here. A follow-up question from Joyce is, would the tax map be considered an ongoing project?
Yes. Yes. And with the tax map, you'll probably have at least one edit map that you're going to be editing. You also will probably have, depending upon what your role is inside of there, you may also have a publication map. All right, so everything and the symbology that you have for your editing map may not be the same as how you go and publish it out. So for example, all right, I'm going to go and insert in here a new map. All right, and I'm going to go and take this map and I'm going to call it, I'm going to rename this. Publication. All right. Now I'm going to go back to this map and I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to go and copy it and paste it in here. All right. So there's my publication, what I'm going to do. But on my publication, I realize that, there's fields I don't want to see. I don't want them to see these fields in here at all. Maybe I want to call it different names in here. All right.
Frank, we have a couple questions that relate to one another as well.
Okay.
Kathleen wants to know, can you bring in an MXD file? And Javier wants to know, is this an MXD file in Pro?
Can you bring in an MXD? Yes. When you bring in an MXD, it actually creates a new map frame for you, along with everything else that's associated with that map. All the data layers, all the sources, all that gets in there. It also tries to bring in as close as possible all the symbology for it. So yes, you can bring in an MXD, and it is a separate map document inside of your overall ArcGIS Pro project. All right. So in here, I was just making these changes and said, well, maybe there's things in here they don't want to see. Notice on here, I am stopped from saving this change in here because it turns out that there are some edits that have never been saved. So it's preventing me from saving this until I save the edits or discarded my edits. And now I can go and save this. So this, by the way, is the data designer on here. And so now if I click on this publication map and I look at this attribute table, I don't see any of these other fields. My aliases are set up correctly. I can highlight stuff and I can set up my configuration for it. So that, Joyce, to answer your question, if your role is to both go and edit the parcels and then push them up for publication, whether that be on premises web service, whether it be on SDE, whatever it is, however you want to push it out, you probably will have a separate map set up for that symbology and for that presentation level. So you would have the field set up correctly for it and all sorts of things on there. So you would probably have multiple maps in any project if that's the work that you do every day. And it will probably be just one project, but you'll have different maps set up. And if you still print, if you still want to cut down trees, right, you would have multiple layouts. I could go in here and say, let's insert another layout on here. And it would, okay, what do I want to do? Yeah, let's do it here. And it will go and insert a layout here. And again, this looks just like the layout view used to look like in ArcGIS or ArcMap. So you can have multiple layouts together with multiple maps, all in a single project. And it stores that all for you. All right. What else do we have? Sorry, Chris.
Kelly wants to know, is there the ability for versioning in Pro?
Yes. There's actually the ability to do two different types of versioning. I unfortunately I'm not connected up to any SDE, but there's two different types. It can connect up to a standard relational database management system, SDE. It can connect up to SDE, and your connections then will be set up to do standard SDE versioning. You would have the traditional create a version, reconcile, and post, and they would be stored in the SDE change tables, the add and delete tables, and it would work just like it always does. It does work. Branded 2.3, 2.4 was a little flaky. 2.5, they've worked that all out. It looks really good. 2.6, it looks even better. So that's regular SDE. But they also, when you hook up to, when you hook up to web services now provide a different type of versioning, and that's called branch versioning. Branch versioning is different in that rather than having on your server 2 different tables, one for the things that you add, one for the things that you delete, and then eventually having to go and take those changes and push them up to your default, instead, it has one constant stream of changes that are edited, and they get marked. Who changed this? What version were they in, and such. So that there is no, for those of you that are DBAs, there is no compress function inside of web services that are using branch versioning. It's just reconcile them, make sure there's no conflicts, and then post them up, and then they're available to everybody in default. Okay. What else?
Larry said from last week, is there a way of bringing a QGIS project file in? But
Yeah.
Tori answered that question for him.
Yeah, sorry. Also, that reminds me, last week I said something that was wrong, and I apologize. I try to, if I'm not sure of the answer, I'll usually go and say, well, let me go. Last week I said something that was wrong. We were talking about under options on how to go and customize the ribbon. And I told you, okay, you can go in here, make modifications to your ribbon, add things, delete things, rename things. And the question was, well, is there any easy way to go and save that or share that with others? And I said, some of the early stuff we'd done, there wasn't, and I didn't realize that, in fact, there is this add and export customization. They've put it in there now. So you can now go and take, and it will take the customization that you have and save it out to a customization file so that you can share your custom changes to your ribbon and then pull them into another default setting. And so you can share them with other people around you. You can share them with others outside your organization. You can share those customizations for those. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, like I said, I'm sorry I misspoke about that last time, but you can now easily share and import and export the customization that you make to the ribbons.
Mandy wants to know, is 2.6 available now?
No, 2.6 is not. I mentioned last week that Panda is actually one of the early alpha testers on 2.6. So we're testing it for some of the feature capabilities and some on there. I can share with you some of what's coming up in 2.6. I can't show you anything. So when I share with you what's coming up, I can tell you this is what's on the roadmap for 2.6. All right. Within 2.6, for the parcel fabric, in fact, on the roadmap is cul-de-sacs. They actually do, and we'll have cul-de-sacs working on there. They actually have the ability now to go and select multiple lines at the same time and divide them all up at the same time. There's some limitations on that, on what you can do. We're going to see in 2.6, we're going to see the initial early least squares adjustments for parcel fabrics. So there's a lot of little things that are coming in, and I must say this, Esri's doing a really good job of keeping on that roadmap and continuing to put new things in there. And the more I get to use Pro, the more I really like it. At the same time, the more I'm discovering things, it's like, I didn't know you could do that. So that's, I think, one of the real benefits of having something like this, where we can share with one another the things that we discover, the things that we find, those sorts of things. All right. What else do we have? Any other questions on here? Mark, were you the one that said keep going? Do you have any other questions? Anything else you want to see in here right now? We haven't even started touching editing or any of those. We've barely gone through this interface. It really, there's a lot in here and there's a lot in here. Nope.
Nothing yet. No.
Okay, I'll say this, speak now or hold your peace for a month. All right.
Oh,
Hopefully-
Mark says, I'm done. I also realized it's after 4:30 on the East Coast.
It is. It is. That's all right. That's all right. So thank you. We'll call it a month. All right. Hopefully I see some of you next week in the Pro Parcel Fabric, maybe even the week after in the Map Parcel Fabric, and then hopefully in the deep dive. So like I said, the deep dive, we're going to go into that data designer and look at some of the things that are built in there. It's really, really interesting what's in there. All right. I'm going to stop the recording now. And those of you. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.